Okay, let's talk establishing shots.
I just feel so good.
Hey, what's up, guys? Red here from Evolva Visuals. Evolva Visuals. Evolva. What's up, guys? Red here from Evolve Visuals. Thanks for tuning in to episode 2 of Camera Moves Every Filmmaker Should Know. For those of you who are new to the channel, I do short films, music videos, and commercials, as well as tutorials on both the creative and the business side of filmmaking. So if you enjoy this content, make sure to hit that subscribe button and that little bell notification. So this is episode 2 of Camera Moves Every Filmmaker Should Know. If you haven't got to check out the first episode, which handled all of the basics, I'll make sure to link to it right there. Make sure you check that out and then come right back here, right back. So what exactly is the establishing shot? Well, it's one of the core shots in cinematography. It's typically the opening shot in your scene, and it helps to convey location, time, and tone. And it's one of those shots that really gets overlooked in your filmmaking because it can seem like it's unimportant, but there's a lot of information that gets conveyed in it. It tells your audience what to expect tone-wise, where they're at, geography-wise, sometimes even when they're at, time-wise. You've seen this shot 1,000 times, that sort of classic trope from the 80s and 90s where the camera's zooming across the waterline and then tilts up to show the city, or in a sitcom where it shows the outside of, I don't know, Seinfeld's building or Steve Urkel's house. You've seen this shot 1,000 times. Those are establishing shots. Now, there's several ways to employ the establishing shot, but today I'm going to cover 3 different techniques. Now, technique 1 is your classic sort of simple wide shot. That is the classic style of establishing shots. We tend to see the outside of a building or the outside of a city. It lets us know, hey, either this film is taking place in this city or this scene is taking place in this location. Now, the cool thing about this shot is to pull this off 10 years ago, 20 years ago, you had to have access to a helicopter, or you had to go into a stock site and buy stock footage. But now with the prices on drones dropping, they're more accessible. You can use drones to pull off some of these same shots. For example, this one from Leon by director Luc Besson, or this crane down from Brian DePalma in Scarface, or even this opening shot from The Dark Knight by Christopher Nolan. And you don't always have to have a drone to pull these shots off. A lot of these shots can be pulled off with just a tripod. Taking a tripod and shooting a wide of a building and then tilting up suggests that that scene takes place on an upper floor. If I point out a particular window and dolly in towards that window or zoom in towards that window, the audience's brain will fill in the gap. These are subtle cues to the audience to let them know where things are happening. And geography is one of those things that's so important to your story because it helps the audience understand where they're at. It helps the audience understand where things is going. Every time the audience has to stop and say, hey, well, I thought this took place on the bottom floor. I thought this was taking place on the top floor. Anytime that there's a question like that, it breaks the suspension of disbelief. Now, this is the quickest way to convey time, tone, and location to your audience, and is the more classical approach to this. But you don't always have to use a wide shot as your establishing shot, which brings us to technique number 2, what I like to refer to as out of context establishing shots. This is something that you see more in stylized directors like David Fincher, Guy Ritchie, Quentin Tarantino, Martin Scorcese. And what they're using is, rather than showing a wide shot and then bringing you into the scene, they're doing the reverse. So they may start on a detail that's going to seem out of context, and then they'll slowly back you out to let you know the geography. So for example, the opening credit sequence from Fight Club, which actually starts inside of Jack's head. Or is it Rupert? I think it's actually Rupert. It starts inside of the character's head and backs its way all the way out through his forehead and up the barrel of the gun, establishing time, tone, and location. Out of context, of course. The opening shot from Apocalypse Now shows the tree line. It's an establishing shot that lets us know that we're there, but it's shown out of context. Another example would be the opening shot from Raging Bull by Martin Scorsese. We see Jake LaMotta in slow motion. We know that we're at a boxing match. We see the boxer, but we don't know exactly what city we're in. We don't know exactly what time we're in. So it's shown out of context. John McTiernan does this a lot also. Now it's important to stop and kind of point out a difference here. Opening shots and establishing shots are not always the same thing. An establishing shot can be both, and an opening shot can be both, but they're not always the same exact thing. So don't assume that an opening shot is necessarily an establishing shot. For example, the opening shot from Memento doesn't establish time, tone, or place, whereas the opening shots at the beginning of Insomnia do show time, tone, and place. So it's very easy to get them both confused because establishing shots help convey information. However, opening shots tend to be more about conveying story, which brings us to technique number 3, which is incorporating the story. So let's go back and take a look at that opening shot from The Dark Knight again. The reason why this shot works so perfectly is because we know as an audience, we know as a moviegoer that we went to go watch a Batman movie. We know that we're going to be in Gotham City. But as we're pulled into this one moment here, where the window bursts out, we're immediately brought into the story and then launched into the bank heist that introduces us to the Joker, the villain of the film. Or even this opening shot from Blade Runner, which we see the city and we see the car go by. Or the infamous one from Star Wars, which tilts out of the titles and we see the Death Star chasing a smaller, much smaller ship. These are ways that filmmakers have found to use establishing shots that also incorporate the story, and that's why they feel more powerful as opening shots. But this doesn't just pertain to opening shots. This can happen anywhere throughout a film. Take, for example, this scene from Skyfall as James Bond drives M back to his childhood home. We start tight on the car, we go down the hill, and the camera cranes up, revealing the statue in the front and the house in the background. And it's interesting to use this example because this was shot by one of the best cinematographers, if not the best cinematographer who's ever, shot anything, Roger Deakins. And his quote on establishing shots is, "The use of an establishing shot is all about context. Yes, it doesn't always make sense to cut to a wide shot just for the sake of letting the audience know where they are, but sometimes that is exactly what does make sense. I would suggest you watch some of your favorite films and see how much wide shots are used in them." And there couldn't be a better possible quote regarding the use of establishing shots. If the use of an establishing shot is to convey information to the audience and let them know where they're at, when they're at, what's going on, who's in this scene, what's the mood of this piece, what happens when you don't convey that information intentionally, you can use it to misdirect the audience. So for example, let's take a look at this scene from Mission Impossible Fallout by Christopher McQuarrie. After we watch the newscast, we open up in what we believe is a hospital room. We never see an establishing shot of the outside. We just fill in the gaps because we see a hospital bed, we see a hospital window, and it makes the reveal in this scene that much more powerful.
Go.
These are moments in which you wouldn't want to use an establishing shot because you're intentionally withholding it to misdirect the audience. Another example is this scene, once again, from The Dark Knight by Christopher Nolan. When the Joker pulls his trick on Batman, and Batman thinks that he's saving Rachel, when in actuality he's saving Harvey, notice that there's no use of establishing shots then either. You can withhold that information to misdirect. So there you have it, today's tutorial about using the establishing shot. I feel like it's one of the most overlooked, underused shots. Make sure that you don't make that mistake. I've done that 1,000 times and then had to go back out and reshoot things or hunt for it on stock sites. Now you know the power of this shot. It's interesting to talk about this because there's sort of two schools of thought on establishing shots. A lot of people feel that it's a more classic style of filmmaking, and the newer filmmakers feel like it slows the pacing down of your film. What are your thoughts on this? Let me know down in the comments below. Or if you have a specific shot that you'd like to see covered in the next episode of Camera Moves Every Filmmaker Should Know, let me know that in the comments below too. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit that subscribe button, that bell notification, and smash that like button. And I will see you in the next episode, but until then, stay on the cutting edge, always challenge yourself, keep grinding and evolving. Red out, Team Evolve.